Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic hypersonic.
Positronic hypersonic.
Positronic hypersonic.
I'm Barry P. Cook, and I'm here to talk to you about the latest episode of Daredevil Born Again. It was called The Grand Design, and the episode picks up right where the last episode left off, with Vanessa about to head into surgery. She's alive, but Kingpin is distraught about her condition. He has to be held back so that the doctors can do their jobs. Officer Powell and the AVTF arrive on the scene to support the mayor, and down the hall, Daniel Blake is trying to downplay the severity of the situation to the press. A short while later, we learn that Vanessa has made it out of surgery, although she hasn't regained consciousness just yet. Kingpin waits at her bedside and tells Powell that if they find Daredevil or Bullseye, he wants them brought in alive. There is, of course, a citywide manhunt for the two vigilantes, who it turns out have taken up temporary refuge in a restaurant kitchen. As Daredevil takes a second to figure out a plan, Bullseye makes it plain that he believes that balance has now been restored because he's now, he thinks, taken out Vanessa, the woman who basically made him kill Foggy, and seems to be okay with the idea that he might die. But Daredevil won't hear it and is keen on keeping him alive. Back at the hospital, Blake continues to answer media queries when he gets a text from BB. He agrees to meet her down the hall and is upset that she managed to track him down. She insists that she's legally allowed to be there even though he says you can't be here, and wants to know whether Vanessa is alive. Blake finally admits that she's in critical condition, and BB leaves after giving Blake a much-needed hug. The doctor then pays Fisk a visit to talk to him about Vanessa, and Fisk says he'll do anything to help his wife. The doctor tells him that Vanessa is in a precarious position, but he's going to do everything he can for her. Now we get a flashback. It's from early in Vanessa's career, when she was working at the art gallery. She likes a piece of art that her boss isn't fond of, and her boss tells her that it could attract a potentially high suitor. Daredevil and Bullseye are now in the tunnels, and Bullseye is in really bad shape, but he argues that he's earned his death. He asks Daredevil whether he thinks Vanessa is dead, but Daredevil doesn't know. Bullseye recalls their fight from the series premiere and says that he was supposed to die after Daredevil threw him off the roof, but he survived. Daredevil says Vanessa's death would be murder, and then Bullseye brings up Foggy, which elicits a reaction from Daredevil, who begins to choke him out before telling him to never say Foggy's name again. Now we get a Matt and Foggy flashback. It's early in their career, before the original series, and their client is a man named Lionel/Ray, whom Foggy knew when he was younger. He's not the nicest guy, nor was he nice to Foggy when they were younger, but his brother was Foggy's childhood best friend. Matt and Foggy manage to get him a good plea deal, but Ray insists that if he goes to prison, he's a dead man. The next flashback shows Kingpin and James Wesley in a car. Wesley lets Fisk know about an issue with the Lion. Then Fisk begins talking about Bitcoin and says they need to start diversifying in this new world. Wesley says he knows someone who runs an art gallery. Back at the hospital, in the present, Fisk watches Vanessa in surgery, and she moves her hand. Daredevil and Bullseye, meanwhile, continue their journey, while Bullseye's condition continues to deteriorate and he falls over. But Daredevil keeps trying to help him. He admits to seeking penance. He wants to save him because he tried to kill him in the past. Daredevil manages to get Bullseye back on his feet, and they march on. Again, back in the past, Matt and Foggy discuss opening Murdoch and Nelson in a few months. They work late into the night, and Foggy eventually finds the police warrant that was used the night of Ray's arrest. It has the wrong address listed. A simple clerical error that means the warrant isn't valid. It's basically a get-out-of-jail-free card for Ray. Matt doesn't believe Ray deserves to walk just like that, but Foggy disagrees and tells Matt that they're his attorneys and they have to do right by him. Matt counters by saying that he wants Ray to go to jail for what he's done, but Foggy says he deserves a second chance, not a death sentence. Elsewhere, Kingpin and Wesley go to meet someone they intend to hire. Again, in the present at the hospital, Daniel watches a news report discussing Vanessa's condition. He immediately gets mad, believing that BB leaked the report. He then runs into Buck Cashman and asks him where he was the night of the fight. Buck lies to him and gives Blake an update on Vanessa's condition. He then invites him to get a hot dog. The doctor tells Fisk that Vanessa's surgery went quite well and he's optimistic about her recovery. Fisk insists that she's going to be fine. Back in the past, Vanessa is seen displaying the art piece she liked. This is intercut with another flashback of Wilson and Vanessa on an island. Back in the present, Buck and Blake head out for the hot dogs, but Buck doesn't stop at any of the corner stands. Buck tells him they're actually going to Albany and that the mayor is aware of their whereabouts. On the way, they talk about how it seems to Buck that the leaks surrounding Vanessa's condition seem to have come from Blake. Buck gives Daniel some of his backstory, including his time in Afghanistan and how he was trained to always follow orders. Buck eventually parks at a hardware store and tells Blake to wait. Blake, for his part, is now terrified because he thinks they're on a one-way trip to his death in the woods, and he contemplates driving off but decides against it. Buck returns with a shovel and an electric saw. Speaking of Buck, in a flashback, Wesley gets out of Fisk's car to meet with a young Buck. He hires him for a job, to kill Ray. Meanwhile, Matt and Foggy get Ray out of jail. He doesn't seem happy about getting out and tells them he's just going to wait for them to find him. Daredevil brings Bullseye to the Clinton church and tells him they'll be safe there for now, but both of them know that if Vanessa dies, no place is safe from the Kingpin's wrath. In the past, Ray's in his apartment and gets a knock at the door and is prepared to meet his maker, but when he opens the door, it's Foggy. Foggy gives him some cash, the same cash he and Matt were saving to open their own firm, and tells him to get out of town. He wants to give Ray a chance to start over. The two remember their troubled childhood, and Ray tells Foggy to let his brother know not to come back because there's nothing there for him. Foggy tells him he will, and Ray tells him to leave. In the present, Daredevil tells Bullseye he knows a nurse who could help him. Bullseye has seemingly given up. He doesn't know what the difference is anymore. He says he and Daredevil are brothers, adding that they're both doing the same thing, scratching the same itch, thinking they can outrun their issues. But they can't. It only gets worse and worse. Bullseye says there's no escaping their fates. The seminarian at the church arrives and tells them that the church will always provide shelter, but the AVTF are there. He goes to the door to give Daredevil and Bullseye time to escape. He tells Powell that he hasn't seen any vigilantes, but the AVTF stormed the church anyway. Daredevil and Bullseye work on an exit strategy, and Bullseye finally tells Daredevil to leave him behind. He insists on dying, saying he killed Foggy without thinking twice and deserves to die. Daredevil is conflicted. He didn't accept it, but sensing no other option, he apologizes to God and escapes. We then see him on the street, monitoring the AVTF as they enter the church. In the past, Foggy leaves the apartment and finds Matt waiting for him at the bottom of the stairs, knowing about the money, and Foggy apologizes, but Matt understands. They head off to Josie's and decide to name their firm Nelson and Murdoch. In the present, Daredevil remembers his moment with Foggy and goes back for Bullseye. He shows him the same mercy Foggy would have, and the two make it out of the church alive. Powell later finds Bullseye's bloodstains and questions the seminarian about his whereabouts. Buck and Blake arrive in the woods, and Blake tries to talk Buck out of killing him. He insists he doesn't know what he did and tells Buck he can just disappear. Buck tells him to get out of the car, and he tells Blake that he likes him and that they both work for a man who could change his life, but he's going to need loyalty first. Buck opens the trunk to reveal 3 dead bodies. Buck asks him whether he wants to use the shovel or the saw. It looks like Blake's flashback to Ray's apartment, where Buck discreetly enters. However, upon entering, he realizes it's empty. Ray took Foggy's advice and fled just in the nick of time. Daredevil returns to the Punisher's hideout with Bullseye in tow, catching Karen way off guard. At the hospital, Vanessa wakes up. She reaches out for Wilson's hand and asks why he's acting so strangely. He breaks down in tears, telling her he was unsure whether he'd ever see her again. He asks if there's anything he can do, and she asks for pineapple juice with ice. He tells her she doesn't like pineapple juice and she's confused but wants to try anyway. Fisk orders the nurse to bring the juice before she's even able to give Vanessa an examination. He's overwhelmed with joy, and Vanessa is confused by his behavior. Later, after Vanessa finishes her juice, she asks Wilson to tell her a story of how they met. A flashback then features Fisk and Wesley arriving at the art gallery. Fisk sees Vanessa from his car and watches her in silence. Vanessa tells Fisk how she must have known he would walk through those doors and change her life. He tells her it was luck, but she calls it the grand design. She then tells him he vastly overpaid for that art piece. He laughs loudly and says he would have paid anything because for him it was the deal of the century. They take a beat, and Vanessa asks Wilson to tell her the story of how they met. Again. Suddenly she can't finish her sentence or even form words and begins gasping for air. Something's seriously wrong, and Fisk starts calling for help. In flashback, we see Wilson looking at Vanessa through the gallery window. She finally turns towards him and the screen fades to white. The doctors tend to Vanessa, but it's too late. She flatlines and dies. Fisk is devastated. The final flashback is of their very first scene from the original Daredevil series. And that's where the episode ended. So, I really liked the Netflix show, and I've liked this show so far. I think it's good. I haven't thought it was anything spectacular, except for the action scenes, which are insane, and except for the acting on behalf of Vincent D'Onofrio and Charlie Cox. But this episode was just on a total other level. This episode, in my opinion, was an absolute masterpiece. And it's really crazy because, the usual suspects do nothing but bash this show on their channels and their platforms simply because it's a Disney show. They can't give Disney any quarter. So even when Disney is producing a show that's at least decent, if not better than that, they have to shit on it. They have to poke every little hole in it they can. They call it boring because there's not enough action in their opinion. They say that Daredevil's been sidelined in his own show because they're focusing on other characters too much, which is ridiculous. They talk about how Karen Page has been given too much screen time because it's an effort on the part of Disney to elevate women and push men back. It's just so ridiculous. And then they made a big deal in this episode because the Kingpin gets emotional. And, Gary over at Nerdrotic said specifically, oh, they've turned him into an over-emotional buffoon. And it's just insane that he would say that because he knows damned well that the Kingpin character on this show has been ruled by his extreme volatile emotions from the get-go, from the beginning of the Netflix show. And the reason for that is because he's a little boy. Psycho-emotionally, he's a little boy who was abused by and then who murdered his father and never got through it, never worked through it in therapy. And that's just who he is. He's a little boy in a giant man's body, and he's ruled by extreme volatile emotions. He has been the whole time. So it's just a ridiculous thing for Gary to say, and he's saying it because he has to shit on a Disney show. He has to shit on it because it's made by Disney. It's just insane. I've said from the beginning that the character is excellent because of how volatile he is and what a study it is of the human condition that this character is written the way it is. And that I find myself conflicted because at times he's quite gentle and at times he's quite considerate and at times he's quite respectful because he's not without any redeeming qualities. It's just that his bad qualities are so insane that they overshadow them. And I've always seen that as a tragic aspect because I think the real Fisk is a good person, a loving person, but that's not how he lives his life in the grander part because he's ill-equipped to do it that way. He has to do it as the big bombastic, take no prisoners guy because to do anything else would be to expose himself to hurt, which, by the way, he still does by, his relationship with Vanessa. That's all that whole thing is for him, an exposure to potential hurt. And so I have found myself liking the Kingpin character as a person because I feel badly for him, because he's tragic. And nothing showed that more than this episode. It just reminded us of what this character is. A tragedy, a walking tragedy. And it's just excellent. And for Gary to shit on it just defies all sense. And he's not the only one, but it's just absurd. It's absurd. This episode was excellent just for the Fisk stuff alone. And then you've got the Foggy stuff, which was unbelievable. Every moment that Foggy is on screen in this episode is fantastic. Because he is the epitome of a good person. And he does the right thing. And it's poignant and moving and powerful. Foggy and Karen were the heart of the Netflix show. The heart of it, the beating heartbeat. Karen's been in the show this season, but she hasn't really been allowed to be that so far. But Foggy was in one episode, and he was immediately that all over again. And it was fantastic. And the way they tied that story from the past into what Matt was going through in the present and how it affected him, and how having had Foggy in his life helps make him the man he is, even if he has to remind himself of that sometimes, is just awesome writing. It's awesome writing. And it's beautiful to see. And of course, sad at the same time because Foggy's gone, but just it's a master class in storytelling and character building and human condition exploring. And then on top of that, you've got Bullseye's arc, where, he hasn't always been the best guy, to put it mildly. And here he is trying to, in his mind, balance the scales and earn salvation. The thing is, he's going about it by murdering people. So it's, I don't think it does what he thinks it's doing just because those people happen to be bad. But, the whole sort of examination of his psyche that we get when he's talking to Daredevil about, balancing the scales and, hey, I'm a good guy now. No, you're not. But, it's just fascinating. It's fascinating. And I can't wait to see where they take it when he survives these injuries. What's the conversation going to be? What's his next arc going to be? Where does he go from here? I somehow don't think they're going to turn Bullseye to a full-blown hero, but I don't know. Maybe they will. Maybe he sacrifices himself to save Daredevil or Karen or somebody else, on the good side. And I think that would be really cool. So, this episode was awesome. I don't think there was one fight scene in it. And it was just fantastic hour of television. Vincent D'Onofrio, Charlie Cox, the gentleman who plays Foggy, the gentleman who plays Bullseye, the woman who plays Vanessa, they were all just on it in this episode, and it just could not have been a better hour of television, and the naysayers are complete and total morons. Now, do I think the first season and this season up until this episode were anything spectacular? No. Do I think they were okay episodes of TV? Yeah. This was different. If the other episodes had been fantastic, I would have said they were fantastic. I don't think they were. I think they had fantastic fight scenes. I think they started building a good narrative, and they were worthwhile to watch. This episode was amazing, and the people who don't get it are just absolute morons. Or, worse, they get it and they're pretending not to because they like to rage bait on the internet because it gets them clicks. And that, of course, is disgusting. Anyway, this episode was fantastic. I can't wait to see where they're going to go from here. Fisk is going to lose his ever-loving shit, and it's going to be great. And that's all there is to say. So, I'm going to get out of here, but I'll be back with another video soon. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.